How to compare decimals using place value. To compare decimals using place value, there are 5 steps. Step 1. Write numbers with decimals and place values lined up. Use a chart to help you. Step 2. Check if positives or negatives. Remember, all negatives are smaller than positive. So if you have one positive number and one negative number, the negative is the smallest. If you have two positive numbers, it's just like you've done before. If you have two negative numbers, remember the number closest to 0 is the largest. So for some of you, it helped to think that negatives count down. Step 3. Fill in any missing place values with zeros. Step 4. Start on the left and compare your place values. If you have the same digit in the same place value, move to the next place value on the right. If you have different digits in the same place values, check if you're working with two positives or two negatives. If you're using two positives, the largest digit tells you the largest numbers. If you're using two negatives, the smallest digit tells you the smallest number. Remember, some of you like thinking negatives count down. If you have one positive number and one negative number, the positive number is the biggest. Step 5, write your inequality statement. Let's look at an example. In the top right-hand corner, I have two numbers, 452 and 781 thousandths. I also have 452 and 209 thousandths. Remember, and only means your decimal. So which of the two numbers is greater? Well, step 1 says write your numbers with decimals and place values lined up. Use a chart to help. Step 2, check if they're positives or negatives. Both of them are positive, so I have to go through all the steps. Step 3 says fill in any missing digits for place values. Each of these has 3 whole number digits and 3 decimal digits. There are no missing digits. I will show you an example of what I mean in a bit. Now we're going to start on the left. Starting in the hundreds place, there are 2 4s. It's the same digit in the same place value, so I'm going to move to the right, to the tens spot. I have 2 5s in the tens spot. Same digit, same place value, move to the right. I have 2 1s. Same digit in the same place value, so I'm going to move to the right. Notice we have hit our decimals here, and we are now moving into decimal numbers. In my tenths place, THS, I have 7 and 2. Those are different, so I have to look at my next step. It says if different digits, check. Do you have 2 positives or 2 negatives? I have 2 positives. That means I look for the largest digit, 7. This number on top, 452 and 781 thousandths is the largest. I now write my inequality. Notice 452 and 781 thousandths is greater than 452 and 209 thousandths. Let's look at an example where I simply have 2 numbers to work with. Step 1 says write the numbers with decimals and place values lined up. I have 0.15, 0.6. The decimals had better be lined up and write nicely. Step 2, check if they're positives or negatives. Both are positive. Step 3, fill in any missing place values with 0. The bottom number, 6/10, is missing a place value to match the top. I need to fill in a placeholder. Step 3, start checking your digits. Starting on the left, we have 1s. They're both 0. Same digit, same place value, move right. 1, 6. Different digits, same place value. Check. Both are positive. So, biggest number, biggest digit. That means 0.15 and 0.6. The 6 in the tens place was bigger. Let's look at some examples where we might have positives and negatives. Step 1 says, line them up. Line up your decimals. Step 2 says, check if they're positive or negative. I have one positive and one negative. Well, this is easy. We know that positives are always bigger than negatives. I don't have any work to do except to make the inequality, our little alligator, eat the bigger number. Remember, we can switch which way our alligator eats as long as it's still eating the bigger number. Positives are bigger than negatives. Here are 3 examples. I have a negative number and a positive number. The positive is always bigger. I have a positive number and a negative number. The positive is always bigger. Negative, positive, positive's always bigger. It is a bit more difficult when we have 2 negative numbers because we have to think about which one is closest to 0 because they feel like they count down. So let's try negative 3,040 and 41 hundredths compared to negative 3,040 and 42 hundredths. First, we're going to line up our decimals. Boop, they're lined up. Then we're going to check. Is one positive, one negative? Darn, they're both negative, so we have to keep working. We have to fill in missing digits. There's 4 whole number digits, 4 whole number digits, 2 decimal digits, 2 decimal digits. No numbers to fill in. So now we compare. We start on the left. 3 and 3 in the thousands digit. Same digit, move on. 0 and 0 in the hundreds. Same digit, move on. 4 and 4 in the tens. 0 and 0 in the ones. We hit our decimal. 4 and 4 in the tenths. And then finally 2 and 1 in our hundreds. Now we have to remember that these are both negative numbers. So when I do a number line, -1, -2, -3, that -1 is bigger than -2. So because they're negatives, I have to use the smallest digit because it's closest to 0. So that -1 is actually bigger than a -2. So this number, -30,040 and 41 hundredths, is bigger than -30,000 and 42 hundredths. So when we're recording, -1 is bigger than -2. We have to eat the bigger number. We want to count down. Here's an interesting example. We have 2 very different numbers. Now, some of you might be able to look at this and go, I already know which one's the smallest and the biggest because I have to count down, and one of those is definitely way further to the left of 0. But let's still do our steps. We line up our decimals, then we're going to fill in placeholders. I'm missing placeholders in my whole numbers. I'm going to move that decimal out. I'm missing placeholders in my decimals, so I'm going to fill them in. Then, starting on the left and moving to the right, 0 and 3. Hey, those are different. So let's check. Do we have negatives or positives? Both are negative, so I want closer to 0. Well, 0 is really close to 0. 0, -1, -2, -3. That means this is the bigger number. So when I write my inequality, there we go. If you're struggling with some of these, it's a good idea to practice. Here are some simpler problems that are all positive for you to practice. Pause your video and see if you get the same answers I do. Did you get the same answer? Now let's look at what happens if we make them all negative. Copy these down and pause your video to see if you can get the right answers now that you're comparing two negative numbers. Did you get them right? Remember, in negative comparing to negatives, we want the ones closest to 0. Now, let's try some variety. Some of these will have positives and some will have negatives. Copy these problems down and see if you can get the same answers I do. Pause your video and check. Did you get the same answer as I do? Remember, positives are always greater than negatives, so these three problems were really easy to figure out. With two negative numbers, find the number closest to 0. With two positives, find the largest digit. Now, one of these doesn't have an arrow because I want to review real quick and figure out whether we would follow the green, red, or blue trick. I have two numbers here. I have 4.28 and 4.32. That 4.28 is negative. I've lined things up and I go, hey, positives are always smaller than negatives. So this would follow our green example right here. Nice and easy. If you're stuck, rewind your video. Try some of these again. They're really great practice